Question number 4, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance and asks, does the half-year Economic and Fiscal Update 2012 state that the government's operating balance before gains and losses will be worse off by $441 million over the next 5 years if the government proceeds with the partial sale of state-owned assets? If so, why does his asset sale program increase the government's budget deficit?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, yes, it does show that. That is one measure of the impact of the sale of the assets on the government's books. Other measures show the government in a slightly better off position. For instance, in terms of straight cash, we'll get more cash in than we forego. However, any of those calculations are based on the assumption that interest rates stay at 50-year lows on government debt and that these companies continue to make the currently predicted profits. I think we've all learnt in the last couple of weeks that there's no guarantee of that just because these companies are owned by the government. If, as in the case of Solid Energy, the forecast profits and dividends are not going to show up, so if we didn't own it, we actually would have been much better off.
Point of order, Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The primary question had two legs. It has been previous speakers' rulings that a primary question, both parts of the question are to be answered. The second part of the question, why does the asset sale program increase the budget deficit, was not answered in my opinion.
And I invite the Minister of Finance to address the second part of that question more specifically.
Oh, well, Mr. Speaker, it shows that because on that particular measure, if you assume that current interest rates on government debt remain the same and that the companies continue to make the currently forecast profits and dividends, then the government would, on the Obergall measure, and I won't go into all the explanations of what that is, the government's books would be slightly behind. We, of course, have weighed that up against other facts, like the fact that we will avoid having to borrow another $5 to $7 billion. The logic of the member's question is that the government would be better off...
Point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Standing Order 3831 and 2 is very clear. The reply to the question must be concise and confined to the subject matter of the question contained. The Minister had answered the question.
And so must the question be. The Minister has now very adequately addressed the question, and it is over to the member whether he has further supplementaries. Point of order, Honourable David Parker.
I ask the Speaker to consider why, when the member Russell Norman raised the point of order, which you accepted, you took a flick at him.
I didn't.
You did.
I acknowledge that questions need to be concise, answers need to be concise. The question had been answered very satisfactorily, and I invited the member, if he wishes to raise further supplementaries. Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister agree that the Obergall measure, the operating balance excluding gains and losses, is the main conventional measure of a government's deficit, and that asset sales increase the government's deficit using that measure?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, it is the measure. It is the current measure, although I'd have to say it's got arbitrary elements to it, as any measure does. Whatever measure you pick, the calculations are done against 3 or 4 different measures, and some the government's a bit ahead, and some it's a bit behind. But the logic of the member's question is that the government should go
Point of order, Dr. Russell Norman.
The question was very specific. It asked whether Obergall was the usual measure used. The Minister agreed with that. He answered that question, and that the $400 million is a deficit increase, and he agreed with that. He's finished answering the question.
No. The Minister, if he goes on in a necessary long period of time, I will bring that to order. But in that opinion, on that occasion, the Minister was very satisfactorily answering the question to the benefit of the member, and I think the Minister should have been allowed to continue his question. We're going to get nowhere in this House today is every time a question is not to the satisfaction of a member asking the question, a point of order is taken that the answer is too long. If the member has further supplementaries, I invite him to ask them. Point of order, Honourable Trevor Mallow.
Mr Speaker, I think the point of order wasn't that it was too long, it was that it was out of order because the answer had been completed.
Well, that's certainly not the way I took the point of order from the member. I took it that he had decided, Dr Russel Norman had decided to his satisfaction that the question had been answered. Didn't need any further addition. But anyway, we are moving on. I'm inviting the member to have further supplementaries if he so desires.
Sir, point of order.
No. Point of order, Dr Russel Norman.
Mr Speaker, the reason why I am insisting on a black and white interpretation of the standing orders is that on Tuesday you told us that ministers will be kept to the black and white interpretation of standing orders, that they must only address the question, not answer it. So I am insisting that you apply the standing orders fairly.
Order. The member has no right, via standing orders and speaker's ruling, to insist on a black and white answer. Now, does the member have further supplementaries? Otherwise, I intend to move to the next question.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr Russel Norman.
How can the minister claim to be fiscally prudent when he intends to spend over $440 million on this particular government program?
Honourable Bill
Speaker,
English.
I don't know if I can emphasise any more that while there's a calculation being made, the number is uncertain. According to the member's logic, if the government could fix its accounts by buying every business in New Zealand, because they might make a return greater than the cost of debt. So why don't we borrow $100 billion and buy all the supermarkets and farms? Well, of course, the Greens won't have to do that. They'll just print the money to fill the gap.
Point of order, Dr Russel Norman.
Mr Speaker, I ask you once again to apply the standing orders to the minister. These are the orders of the House. I don't make them up. Right? They say
the member is now attempting to use the point of order process to debate the quality of the answer. If he continues to do that, we will move to the next question.
Supplementary.
Dr Russel Norman, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can the minister confirm that the claim of a $441 million cost to the asset sale program by increasing the budget deficit is not a claim by the Green Party, it is by his own department called the Treasury?
Honourable Bill English.
Yes, I can confirm the Treasury has done that calculation. But, of course, that is uncertain. Last year they did a calculation about solid energy, which has proven to be spectacularly wrong. OK, so we haven't made a lot of money by keeping solid energy. These businesses are all risky, and to follow the member's logic, we could solve the government's budget problem by printing $100 billion and buying every business in New Zealand.
Supplementary question.
A supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Thank you. Point of order, Tracy Martin.
Sorry, sir, I know I'm new, but I understood that points of orders were to be heard in silence.
Yes, they are. And the member is now asking a supplementary question. Otherwise, we are moving on. Dr Russel Norman, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Has the minister seen the other Treasury estimate, if he reads Treasury papers, which show that 95% of New Zealanders will not be able to buy shares in his newly privatised SOEs?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, I don't have that. I don't recall that estimate. If that was in the Treasury paper, I don't agree with it. And we will get to find out over the next few weeks when the government offers the opportunity for pre-registration. Of course, there will be thousands of New Zealanders who could be able to buy the shares who will decide not to, because they think they've got better ways of spending the money, and that's one thing National believes in: Kiwis making their own choices about how to spend their own money.
Point of order, Dr Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I seek leave to table the Treasury request for proposal. Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Order. It's a point of order and it will be heard in silence.
I seek leave to table the Treasury request for proposal dated 24th May 2012, which says...
Leave us sought to table that particular document. Is there any objection? There is.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr Russel Norman.
Will the minister pledge to listen to the results of a specific referendum on asset sales, now that we have the numbers needed to have a citizens-initiated referendum, Or are we now living in a country where the board of Sky City Casinos has the ear of the Prime Minister, but this government doesn't listen to ordinary New Zealanders?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the referendum which we think is the most credible one, and the Greens might have a different reason because they prefer referendums where they paid their parliamentary staff to collect the signatures. However, we prefer the referendum...
Order. The tone of the question was very political. A political answer has been given in return. Honourable Bill English.
There was a referendum in 2011 where we didn't have to go and pay people to sign up. It's called the election. And as I recall it, National and its coalition partners won the election when that member had had 12 months to persuade New Zealanders that asset sales were a bad thing, and he failed.
Point of order. Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
I'm far from disputing your ruling. I'm agreeing with your last ruling, sir. But could I just ask you this question? Is it correct that member asked, I think, at least 3 very specific and straight questions, and no political loading in them by my count, and on each and every occasion you allowed flicks, political comment and irrelevant information to be hurled back at that member? And I simply ask you this: are you going to be consistent with your last ruling, which I endorse, or are you going to be inconsistent, as you have been in my view, sir, with that member?
Order. That is quite a dangerous point of order where you are questioning the ruling of the Speaker. I'm attempting to be consistent with all my rulings. You must acknowledge that every question, every answer has difficult connotations, but I gave my assurance on my election to this position that I would operate in an absolutely unbiased fashion, and I am genuinely attempting to do that. I thank the member for his point. I move to question number 5 in the name of Jacinda Ardern.
Speaker, my question to the Minister of Social Development: does she stand by all her statements on Tuesday, 26